Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to do a non-spoiler review for Raise the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. This is an adult fantasy standalone based in a desert-like setting. Now I think that standalones are just perfect as a palate cleanser in between series, and we as fantasy fans know that there are a ton of series that we're usually in the middle of, and I don't think that I've heard a lot of people talk about this book before. So that's why I thought I would share my ideas about this hidden gem in my opinion, because I really enjoyed this one. I also think that because the writing style is quite simple and the plot is easy to follow, that this would be an ideal book to pick up if you're new to fantasy or if you've tried some YA before but now want to dip your toes in adult fantasy. So without further ado, let's get to the review. Now first I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the plot, because this is definitely a plot-driven book and I feel like if you're not going to be interested in the premise, this is probably not the book for you. In this story, we follow two very strong women. On the one hand, we have Tamra. Tamra is a single mother, but she is also a professional trainer of Keyhawks. Now in this world, Keyhawks are actually very evil human beings that have been reincarnated as monsters. Tamra is in desperate need of money because her daughter is actually training to become an augur, who in this world is a kind of priest-like person who can read people's souls. And Tamra needs to pay tuition fee every couple of months. If she's not able to do so, the temple will take her daughter away from her. Of course, Tamra wants to prevent this at all costs, and her way to get money fast is to find a very fast Keyhawk and to find somebody who can ride this Keyhawk and win the next races. On the other hand, we are following Raja. Raja is a younger woman who is fleeing from her parents because they want to sell her to an abusive husband. Now she also wants to get money fast because she thinks that if her parents find her again and she's able to pay them off, they will leave her alone. So of course these two storylines are going to emerge together, and that is something that I was expecting, but you also have a separate storyline that you also follow, and that takes place in the palace. So you have quite some political intrigue that is here as well. You actually also follow the emperor-to-be, and this storyline also emerges with the one of Tamra and Raja. The Keyhawk in itself also has a very important role to play. So all of this was a plot that I wasn't expecting to be so expansive, but I actually really enjoyed it and it was much easier to follow than you might think following my description. I thought that it was very fast paced and that the plot had some unique things that happened. That story in itself is very unique. So the plot I actually liked, and I think if you like this religious type of setting where you also follow an augur, who is a priest-like person in this world, then this is something that will definitely appeal to you. If we then go over the writing style and some technical choices that the author made, this is written in third-person past tense with multiple POVs. Now, of course, you have Raja and Tamra, but you actually also have the POV of the daughter that you sometimes follow. You have Tamra's boss that you follow. You have an augur, and as I said before, this is something that I actually found very interesting, to follow one of these priest characters and what they think and what the political intrigue there is as well. And you follow the emperor-to-be. So you definitely have multiple POVs, but because after a while they do emerge together in the plot, it's not too difficult to follow. I also thought that each of the characters had a very unique voice and that this was very well done by the author. This is also, of course, because all of the characters have a very unique character as well. They have some personality traits that are very typical for them, and this is why their own voices were very clearly heard throughout the story. I also think that the writing style is very simple and easy. This isn't a negative for me, but it's definitely not a positive either. I think if you read Circe, for example, this is something that a lot of people will bring forward as a reason to read this book. Pick this book up because the writing style is just beautiful. That's something that I wouldn't say per se for Raise the Sands. The writing style is simple, the writing style is straightforward, and it's just good. It's a way to tell the story, but nothing extra. Because of this, as I said before, I do think that this would be a perfect book to pick up if you're new to adult fantasy and if you're not quite used to those types of writing styles where you have to read a sentence a couple of times to understand what they mean with the metaphors or something like that. That's something that you're not going to find in this book. Now, because you follow so many different POVs and because each of these POVs have a part of the puzzle, you don't really have a lot of plot twists. You actually know everything, while each of the characters that you follow know a little bit. That does mean that you are not going to be having a lot of plot twists. So if that's something that you are expecting in a fast-paced book, and this definitely is a fast-paced book, then you are going to be disappointed. I also don't think that this was the meaning of the author, to have plot twists. I think she was trying to give you all of that information and have you be somebody who knew what was going to happen before it actually did. But I do know that not everybody likes that, so be aware before you go into the book. As I said, it's definitely a fast-paced book. You don't have any passages that you think, please, put the story along. Because, as I said, so many different POVs, you get new knowledge from each of them that has an impact on the other person's story. So that's why I do enjoy it, and I think that it's a very fast and easy read. So if you're looking for a palate cleanser, then I do think that this is a very good recommendation. Next up, I would like to talk about magic system, fantastical elements, and world building. Now, this story takes place in the city of Bekar. You definitely have different places that you visit throughout the book, and it also feels very open, because the main plot takes place in the training area, and this is where the Keyhawks train for the races and the stables and stuff like that. So you are not really in the city, or at least it doesn't feel like that. Another main place that you will visit is the temple and, of course, the palace. So you do have some going back and forth because, as I said, the different POVs live in different places and they are not together until a certain point in the story. You also have the desert around it that gets visited a couple of times by Raja and by Tamra. So it doesn't really feel like it's a static story because you have all this going back and forth. It's of course not going to be a quest, there's not going to be a lot of traveling happening, but to be in a city, there happens quite a lot and more than I was expecting, and I quite enjoyed that. I also really liked how the temple was built and the religion. I enjoyed that the augurs actually have a lot of power and what that means. I think that this is definitely one of the themes that is quite interesting to follow. You have these augurs, they have a lot of power. You have these augurs that try to find future new augurs by reading their souls, and in the end nobody can really control what the augurs are doing. Nobody can see if what they are doing is actually right, because nobody else has that power. And I think that that's definitely something that, even though it wasn't the main plot, it was interesting to discover throughout the story what this actually meant for political intrigue, for political power and stuff like that. So I do like how that was built up and how you have some myth and lore in this book. Of course, if you are going to pick this up, it's very important that you do believe that this reincarnation and this religion is actually true. These are facts in this world. If we then go to magic system, there actually isn't one. The main thing that makes this a fantasy book are the Keyhawks. So the Keyhawks and of course the whole religion, that's the magical part. The augurs of course have some magical abilities, by which I mean that they can actually read some person's soul, and by doing that they know if they are dealing with a bad or a good person. But that's basically the extent of it. And you don't really see that having a big impact on the story. You have some instances where this can drive the plot forward, but it's not a very big influence in general. So the main force of having this as a fantasy book is of course that it's a secondary world and the Keyhawks. But I actually quite enjoy that. I don't think that every story needs to have main characters who have these fantastical abilities. I quite like to follow normal people in an abnormal world. And then lastly, I want to talk about the characters. Now, even though this is a plot-driven book, and I think that in a lot of cases this often means that the characters are not that interesting to follow, I would say that this is not the case for this one. I actually enjoyed all of the characters and I thought they were very unique. And to do that in a pretty short fantasy standalone was surprising for me, so I was definitely not disappointed in that aspect either, me as a character-driven reader. So first of all, of course, we follow Tamra and we follow Raja. Now, I have told you a lot about these characters up until this point, so I'm not going to go too deeply into them, but I would like to say that I really liked the difference between the two and how this contrasts each other. Because of course you have Tamra, and Tamra is pretty strict, she's pretty hard. And part of that is because she has some life experience and she knows what it's like. She actually was a rider before she was a trainer, until something happened. She needs to take care of her daughter, and she knows how hard the world is and that they are going to take her daughter away from her if she doesn't get the money. So her very hard approach and not really trusting a lot of people comes from something, and it stems from her past life. But then you have Raja, and even though Raja has gone through a lot as well, with her parents trying to sell her off, she still has a lot of hope. She still has a lot of trust in people and even in Keyhawks. And having these two people brought together and interact with each other and actually clashing sometimes but also learning from each other was something that I enjoyed a lot. I think that this is definitely the mentor trope with the student, but I think that in this case the mentor also learned some things from the student. So that's definitely something that I enjoyed. But we don't only have these two characters. You also have the daughter of Tamra, and I think that even though she only has some POVs throughout the story, seeing how Tamra interacts with her daughter and how her daughter is the most important part of her life, seeing how she changes when her daughter is in the scene, it's also something that I really enjoyed. So I do think that these character relationships were developed quite well. You also follow the Emperor-to-be, but this is a completely different storyline for the most part of the book. But I did enjoy that you have some political intrigue there and that this Emperor-to-be also has some stuff to deal with, because he never expected to become the emperor, and especially with the circumstances that are happening at that moment in the world. This is of course something that you have to figure out for yourself, but just know that this was also a very interesting character to follow and well developed. And then of course, lastly, we have the Augur. And this was an interesting character to follow because he came from a completely different perspective than Tamra. Tamra, of course, distrusts these augurs because they are trying to take her daughter away. They are hassling her for money, for the tuition fee, and otherwise she's not allowed to see her daughter again. But then you have this augur, and this augur is actually an okay person. He's not bad, he has his own beliefs and his own way of looking at the world. So again, there I did enjoy that contrast as well. What I do think was a little bit of a negative is that Raja meets some people in the training ground or on the training grounds, and she develops a friendship. But that friendship seemed to be a little bit rushed, and it's almost like an insta-love but then with friendship. Now, even though I do enjoy to see that the author tried to have some friendships inside the story, I thought that was almost a little bit too much to try to have in this standalone. You already have a quite expansive plot. You already have this mentor and daughter. You have a mother who is trying to do everything to get money. You have the augur. So you have all of these interactions, and I felt like the friendship didn't need to be there, especially if you don't really have the time to actually develop it. But it's there, and if you enjoy that, I don't really see a lot of people have a negative thing to say about it, so maybe I'm just the only one, but that felt a little bit rushed. So if you're going into this to find an amazing friendship, you're not going to have that, but I did think that the mentor-student relationship was very well done. So, to summarize, I greatly enjoyed Raise the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst, and I would recommend this to everyone who is looking for a quick and fast-paced read with a very unique plot and with two very strong female protagonists. I would stay away from this book, however, if you are looking for a book with a very elaborate magic system, because as I said, there really isn't one here, or if you're looking for a lot of political intrigue, because even though there is a little bit here, it definitely surface deep and it's not really elaborate, something that you don't know what's going to happen. If you're looking for a lot of plot twists, again, that's something that you're not going to find here. So know what you're going into before you pick this one up. So these are my thoughts on Raise the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. I hope you got something out of this video, and please let me know if you want to pick this one up or if you maybe already read this one and what your thoughts were. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and see you next time. Bye!